Peace, peace, peace. I am Dr. Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into hashtag You Good Man, a men's wellness conversation. This is a safe space where we invite you into open, honest dialogue around our healing, our health, and our attempts at holding it all together in real time. This week, I'm joined by a brother whose work lives at the intersection of story, strategy, and soul, Donnie Moreland Jr. He's a multidisciplinary artist, storyteller, health educator, and brand strategist. He's a founding member of Fellowship of the Griot, where Donnie is helping build community through the voices of Black writers and our allies. He's also the author of My Daddy Never Taught Me How to Write a Love Song, a lyrical and vulnerable meditation on love, legacy, and fatherhood through the eyes of a Black man raising a Black daughter. I definitely feel that. Donnie, welcome to the show, man.
I appreciate you having me. Yeah, I was looking forward to this conversation. So, yeah, I appreciate the invitation.
No doubt, no doubt. So before we dive into the conversation, I want to ask you the most important question I'll ask you today. You ready for it?
For sure.
How are you really feeling? Or more succinctly, you good, man?
Oh man, about an hour ago, I had an incredibly intensive therapy session with my therapist. I
Ooh.
hadn't seen her in about 2 months, so I'm still processing a lot of what she put down. And I told her at the top when we first, met, don't hold back. Like I've been in therapy since I was a teenager. Like, let's just get into it. I have these needs, and she been going at it. So today was one of them ones. So if I got that look in my eyes, like that's why I'm still. But that's perfect. That's perfect, to kind of come into this platform with that energy, So
For
I'm,
sure.
I'm,
Thank you for that.
to answer the question, I'm here. I'm
No,
here.
and sometimes that's where we are, right? That's
Yeah,
where we are with it, right? Sometimes we look for the extraordinary, but the ordinary can be extraordinary, and we need to be
absolutely.
present as often as possible. Listen, as a therapist myself, that post therapy clarity, it'll have you like, all right, who am I cutting off today? What has happened in my life? I need to make 1,000 changes,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So
yeah,
it's like fresh out the gym, right? Or fresh out
absolutely.
something where it's just like you're energized, but you're
Mhm.
contemplative, right? So I appreciate you being vulnerable enough to
Of
share
course.
that, right? And let folk know, listen, therapy another safe space,
Mhm.
right? And it's an important space where us as Black men specifically need to find ourselves where we can have these healthy conversations that include healthy pushback. So again, I appreciate you for that.
For sure. For sure.
So, with that being said, right, I want to pause and name something that's been heavy on a lot of us:
Mm.
the passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner. That hit us hard. So, Donnie, what came up for you when you heard the news?
Oh man, so and I was driving to get some lunch yesterday. I got a text message from another poet here in Houston, and they broke the news. And of course, well, some folks know that Malcolm Jamal Warner was a poet. They're damn good with that. Some folks don't, but like I know him as an actor, but then later on down the line, knew his work as a poet. And that was context of why the other poet hit me up.
Mhm.
Um, I immediately called my mother. Uh, and the reason I called her was because we've there's one thing that like she's allowed me space for as I've gotten older is to have to be a container for conversations about things I don't understand. Like, even if she doesn't have an answer, he's like, for things you don't understand, you can call me. Whenever you confused,
Mhm.
you can call me. Um, and I just had this heaviness on me. I don't know Malcolm Jamal Warner, right? It's not like I didn't have some intense relationship with his acting or his work, but there's something about just life, living, the susceptibility that we all have. I mean, we all gonna pass on, but like we think about like our relationship with death, especially as Black men, early transition, and we recognize the accident, but still, it's on you, right? It's like 54. It's like, man, 32, and and so I was talking to her just about like, you know, uh, my thoughts I've been having a lot lately, just about how we affirm life, and
Mhm.
how do we sustain a measure of sacrality around life and living, especially when we come from, conditions where we've been dehumanized to the point of it being policy, right? Like it being
Yeah.
it's how
Yeah.
we hear, right? It's like I ask the question all the time, like, what does it mean to be bred? Like that's like that's the beginning conversation for us, right? Like we're not talking about the history of Africa, but like as black folk in this country, like it's what does it mean to be bred? So, not to get too heady about it, but it's like the idea of like how affirming life. Like, what does that mean in practice, right? Because it's like, we lost Roberta Flack this year, and I do believe there's something to be said about people that use their creativity to allow space for folks to feel or engage with love, feel or engage with joy. I feel like when those folks, when they pass on, it's like we all missing something. There's something missing. It's
Yeah.
not categorizing them, we put them in a hierarchy, people pass, but it's just like we talk about how it is someone uses their life, right? To put out, whether it be messaging, art, you know, their principles, like that has to do with like sustaining joy, sustaining love. When that person is gone, it does feel like something missing. We're
Yeah.
not gonna get that
Yeah.
back, right? We're not
Yeah.
gonna get that back. And so, it's talking to her just about like, again, creating space for affirming life and how to do that in my work, right? Like especially like creating space for affirming life amongst us,
Hmm.
right? Amongst us, because
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a different strategy, different practice. I feel like different conversations to be had, and so it hit me. It hit me the way I wasn't expecting, but it's a long-standing conversation I've just been having about like sacrality in life, affirming life, and how as an artist, how you do that and provide space for that.
Word, word. Listen, I appreciate you sharing that, and I'll offer my thoughts on Malcolm Jamal Warner a bit later.
Mm,
But what I will say is, for so many of us, especially Black men of a certain age, Malcolm represented something real,
mm,
right? He was, for many of us, he was the first one to show us tenderness, to show
mm,
us what it looked like to grapple with identity, emotions, and the relationships in public. And so that's what, and that's part of what makes your book so needed and so timely. So
appreciate
I want to get into that,
it.
right? So your book, My Daddy Never Taught Me How to Write a Love Song.
Yeah.
Why this book? Why now?
Oh man, I mean, there's a lot of answers to that, but I'll try to keep it succinct. It was now or never, really, right? Like I've
Mm,
been working on different iterations of this book for the last 10 years, and specifically within this iteration, which covers, kind of my becoming a father, then becoming a quote unquote single father. I'm trying to move away from that, that language. I think that has a particular connotation I don't appreciate, but either way, like being the primary, caretaker for my child. You know there's there's a story that comes with that I needed to exercise, and yeah, I wrote the book I wrote this iteration over the course of like 3 months, and then worked to get it in a publishable shape, and then get it published. Part of being a publisher is like you get rejections, rejections. Be like, I'm moving on from the story. I'm not gonna want to be talking about this story when I'm 32 now, when I'm 42.
mm,
When I'm 37. Like think about that in line. It's like I don't want to be in that narrative. It's a part of my narrative, but I don't want to be in it anymore.
yeah.
Um, so it was like now or never. And I reached out to a wonderful artist in Wisconsin, Nikisha Roberts, and she has a organization and a publishing company, John Urban Arts. I say, hey, look, I want to. I would love to pitch my work. I would love for y'all to take on the work. She was just without question, because she'd already been, incredibly supportive of my poetry, especially for like the last year or two. And so she was like, without question, without question.
Mm,
So all right, it was time. It was time, because
yeah.
I told
Yeah.
myself a few months. It was like a few months before. if not this year, I'm putting this up. We'll move on
Hmm.
because I can't live in this narrative anymore. I'll be telling myself, you know, lies about where I am now as compared to where I was, and I don't want to do that. Like I've moved forward from certain things. So let's just put this out. Let's get it out.
Let's get
Let's
this
get it
out there.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
So,
we
so
can.
with that being said, what
Mhm.
were you reckoning with as you wrote it? And so,
Mhm.
having somebody who's navigated, uh, I'm here today, right? Because I was questioning vacillating whether I was going to say successfully or not. But again, I'm here in this moment,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is truly the only thing that
Mhm.
matters, right? So that is success. And so I can only imagine
Mhm.
me writing my story about navigating fatherhood, being the father of a daughter and now a son, all the things that may come up for me in this.
Mhm.
So again, with that being said, what were you reckoning with as you wrote it?
I mean, quite a bit. It was the first thing is like, how do you protect people, right? Like, you know, I'm not a father without other people, right?
Hmm.
Who are involved in my becoming a father. So how do you protect that person, right? How do you protect? I mean, the title, "My Daddy Never Taught Me How to Write a Love Song." Like, how do you protect my father? How do you protect certain people that are pivotal to uh, the poems in this book? Without it being exploitative and extractive, but it's sustaining, you know, but it being to sustain, my it existing to sustain my voice as the primary kind of attention bearer and holder for the audience. Like, this is
Hmm.
not about them, this is about me, because they have stories their own, and they get to own those, right? But how they show up in my story, I get to own. But it's still navigating within that. How do you protect people? That's one thing. And second thing is like, my kids are gonna read this one day. It's like, what I need to make sure that it's something that when she picks up, she's not looking at me like, what, like what's going on? Like, why did you write this? Like, and then third, it's making sure it's truthful, right? And truth is already a gray area word, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
ambiguity in truth. Like, what's my truth for sure? People say, oh, it's your truth, my truth, and the truth. It's like, it's really no the truth. Like, it's all stories at the end of the day, right? It's like we're operating from places of memory that is, could be fueled by misinformation, and fueled by whatever else that can you know interrupt the facts of the facts of history, personal histories, otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, what's the truth here, which ultimately is asking the question like, what's my truth in the complete truth? Like, where was I a contradiction, or where was I contradictory? Like, where was I at fault? Where am I the person that needs to hold or bear the responsibility in this story, regardless of how I feel, regardless of the resentment I bear? It's like, I have ownership. I need to take ownership of certain things and be honest about that if I'm going to write this. Because if I can't do that, you don't need to write this.
Hmm.
Um, so all those things, right? And then of course there's the artist things like, like, do I have the talent, the skill enough to to pull this off? So
Yeah.
those are the different things I was working through.
Yeah, you highlighted this idea of protection, right? When we're writing stories that involve other people, as you articulated, we aren't necessarily single fathers. We interact with so many different entities, right, that influence how we show up as fathers. It reminded me of my dissertation which was I'm not gonna bore folk with the details, but it's an autoethnography of me navigate of stories of me navigating my mental health, which is
Mhm,
based in a memoir, and then juxtaposing that with Black men's mental
mhm,
health here in Philadelphia and here in America. And one of the things I learned when writing this auto ethnographic endeavor was this idea of like triangulation, right? When it comes to specifically coming to, because it's data, right?
mhm,
It's data. And so when we talk about this idea of truth, right? And so we have this emotional truth that
mhm,
exists, right? These feelings connected to these experiences that we have. And then when we're able to step outside of that emotion, we have this cognitive awareness,
mhm,
right? That hey, this what was happening, this was the context of which it was happening. Not to say that it invalidates how you're feeling, right? But we also have to be mindful of that. And then we have this input from others, right? Because again, there's other people in this story, which again goes to ideas of protection. How am I going to tell this story that's authentic to me, while still respecting that somebody else who's a part of this story and who I may be talking about didn't necessarily experience it that way and see it this way,
Right.
right? And so I think you highlighted how we're consistently negotiating that, right, when we are writing from this first person perspective. So I appreciate you bringing that up, right?
Absolutely.
Now in your book you talk about legacy, right? And you talk about learning to love with intention. What
Mm.
did writing this book reveal to you about love, and maybe what love isn't?
Yeah, so the title, my daddy never taught me how to write a love song. Like, love songs, are an anchor for the book, right? Because that's I look at I look at soul, R&B, blues. Yeah, I look at the legacies of this music that kind of illustrate for us how love should be. But a lot of that stuff is like, it's people know now is trademark, because it trademarks codependency, right? Like emotional abuse, manipulation, emotional terrorism, like all these things, and I talk about that, right? But for me, it's like looking at like what are there's a section that's to do specifically with my experience learning how to care for my child by myself, like principally
Mhm.
like by myself, or as the principal caretaker, and you know thinking about like the pop cultural imprints, thinking about the cultural imprints, thinking about all the things that kind of show up in the world around me as I'm like trying to navigate. How do I do this? And then looking out and seeing like, oh, these are the relationships in my community that I'm seeing take shape around me, or these are the relationships that I'm seeing kind of unfold. And it's like, that's not love. That's not what it should be. I may not be able to name what it is, but like, it can't be that, because where are y'all? Like, I had these neighbors. There's a poem I wrote about my neighbors. Like every day it was F you, da 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 da. Furniture's moved
Mhm.
all, and it's like, but then open the door and they full embrace and everything. And it's like, I'm not here to judge or shame, but that's not that ain't it. That ain't it, right? But that's no different than some relationships that have existed in my family, exist in my family, right? Like that friends can kind of call upon as like touch points of like, you know, it, where they've seen people, try to find love in these explosive, emotionally terroristic terrains, and there's a lot that goes into it. But for me, one of the most important things was like naming what it isn't, right? Like,
Mhm.
and where it wasn't in my story, right? With people I've dated, with the relationship, with my child's mother, relationships I've had with paternal figures in my life, the places where it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Without naming or without shaming or passing judgments, like, but this just wasn't what it was, and maybe this is why it wasn't what it was, but still have to name this wasn't what it was. But it still gets to be. It's just we're gonna figure it out next time. But right now, we talk about like what it's not, because a lot of touch points for people, like what it is in popular culture, in the things we hold on to very tightly, right? Like music, the arts, like it's not an expression of like love. It's not an expression of like what love has to be for us to get to the place that we want to. We have like other
Mhm.
conversations about like our people, right? Um, so like that was to me like what I was learning in real time, but then also what I was attempting to illustrate, and how all these things play a role in just like my day to day, right? Loving
Yeah.
my daughter, learning to figure out what loving my daughter looks like, learning to figure out what loving myself can look like, while raising a child. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, just a lot of a lot of heady work.
Yeah, yeah.
Heady
No,
work.
I think that's important, right?
Yeah.
To go a little bit deeper, right? When we talk about writing as a tool, it's not just for expression,
Mm,
right? It's also for healing. It's also for coping. It's also for understanding. I think we talked about Malcolm Jamal Warner, right? He's grown up. God bless the ancestor. He's grown up in the spotlight from a young teenager to an adult man on television, right, with the Tracy Ellis Ross
Yeah.
show, which was him and Tracy Ellis Ross on I believe it was BT, right? We've seen this change, right? This evolution. Again, we don't know him personally,
Right.
right? But then when we see him in the spotlight and we see him talking about black folk, when we hear him through his music, when we see him through his poetry, it's just this profound love that he
Mhm.
has for folk. And we like, yo, that used to be Lil Theo. Now Lil Theo is this grown man who again who centers black folk. Right. So what I hear you talking about, right? Again, it's about healing, it's about coping, it's about understanding. And that's why I believe that writing is such an important tool when we talk about this healing journey that so many of us say that we're on. Like writing can be such an integral part. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I'm gonna actually, I have this book here. This is my book. This is Essex Hemphill Ceremonies, and I always talk Essex Hemphill when I talk about my work because like that, he's my North Star in a lot of ways. There are a
Hmm.
few authors and poets that are my North Stars: Essex, Chris Abani, so on and so forth. But Essex, he was deeply involved in in the '90s, during the AIDS crisis as a black gay man, as an artist, as a poet, as an activist. He did it right. It's like we talk about writing with vigor, emotional vigor, writing from a place of love, even when it seems like love can't be found, right? You're talking about a brother who
Hmm.
passed away in '94 in DC. Like what else happened in DC around that time? Million Man March. There was a lot of brothers who weren't there that should have been there. But for him the anchor, is Joseph Beams, one of his comrades who also passed. Like black men loving black men is a revolutionary act. So like what does that mean? Writing about black men when it seems like there's a lot of brothers that don't love you. Right? How do you write about love in that respect? So when you work from that terrain, it's like, you did it. Right. And people can talk about like some of X's contradictions. Well, we all have contradictions, but it's just like for me to get to, my book, it's like I gotta start with those who already did it, right? Essex, Baldwin, Chris Abani, right? These cats that like they took we talk about writing with vigor, they took it on, but it also is poetry as intervention, right? It's something I'm also looking to explore. Um, poetry that it could operate as a tool. It's like it doesn't always have to be cathartic. I feel like catharsis
Hmm.
is fine, but when we talk about like art operating as a tool for wellness, as a tool for violence prevention, as a tool, as a public health tool, it's like it can't just be cathartic.
Yeah.
But how do you write out of catharsis and move into writing with a kind of vigor, writing with a kind of emotional truth, writing with a kind of intention to be impactful? And that takes reading the cats that have done it. It takes reading the cats that have written from a place of like written from an emotional real estate that is so vast and so grand and, and it encompasses so many different complex colored emotions, right? Like Essex had to do with ceremonies. Um, you gotta do the knowledge. Right?
Yeah.
You gotta do the knowledge. You gotta study. You gotta read. Like you cannot be a good writer if you're not a reader, and not just reading, but like processing. Right. So you gotta read. And I think that for me, it's like that's where it begins. Like knowing who's done it. I'm not the
Yeah.
first one to do it, and there's a lot of things I still need to do to get to where I would like to. But again, I shout out Essex when it comes to being a model.
Yeah. And what you're talking about, right? You're talking about tradition,
Yeah.
right? We're talking about tradition of black men using storytelling as we can't even get to healing if we're not surviving, right? So first
Right.
and foremost, we're talking about survival. And so with that being said, and you being a part of this tradition,
Mhm.
I'm certain that it'll be a black boy, a black man, or somebody who loves black boys and black men who'll watch this and who'll look at you as, hey,
Hmm.
you know what? You're my North Star, right? So what's a prompt that you can offer to those who are watching for them to begin their own reflection process?
What's a prime? Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. Um, I would say, you start with the basics, like write about what it means to feel good. Yeah,
Mhm.
write about what it means to feel good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm gonna tell you what Sonia Sanchez, the Jegna, when she told me I was writing the aforementioned dissertation. I was sitting in the coffee shop. Shout out to Uncle Bobby's, my cheers. And I was sitting in there, and she came in. I'm on chapter like 4 or 5, whatever chapter I was on. And I
Yeah.
was like, listen, I'm gonna say something to her. I just gotta say hello.
Yeah.
Right. I gotta say hi. And so, I went up to her. She's, so short in stature, but big in
Mhm.
personality and all of these things. And so I said, listen, I'm struggling, Sister Sanchez, to just get my thoughts out for this. And she said, Phil, listen, she said, just write what you see. Write what you see right now.
Mhm.
Right. And I'm like, initially I was just like, huh? Like, right, what no, I'm supposed to be writing on this. I gotta write for the assignment. I have to write for the work. I have to. She says, just write what you see. And so that's what I did. I sat. I had the person next to me who was drinking coffee, who was laughing. I had the person outside just walking back and forth, and I started writing about these things. And what that did was that freed me up from the bondage that was this writer's block,
Mhm.
right? And so, hey, what feels good to you, right? That's a start. It doesn't have to be anything
Yeah.
again extraordinary, even just the ordinary, a smile or so forth. So I appreciate you offering that. Now, with that being said, will you feel comfortable in sharing just a short piece
Yeah.
from your book?
For sure. For sure.
Just the equivalent of see, I don't even know if you old enough. You 32, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
remember the boy who outside the store hustling the city. He's like, yo, I spit high five. Well, give me something then.
Give
You
you
know what
some.
I mean?
Right. Right.
Well,
Right.
give me
Yeah.
something.
No. This is a shorter piece. It's about writing what you see. This piece called Unit 201. Um. Yeah. I think a lot of times we get so wrapped up and kind of moving forward, like we tend to forget that things have happened, and those things should be memorialized. Um. And we should still hold space for like honoring those things. So, this is Unit 201. I wonder if my sweat haunts the shower water, or if what I heard was my upstairs neighbors or just us from the year before. I knocked on the ceiling, but no one answered me. At night, I swear I heard stomping above my head. Thing is, it sounded like my daughter during lunchtime running away from the choo choo train of carrots smushed in the carpet, and that was her first wake. And that woman who used to say my name before confession, I wonder if the floorboard still accounts for her weight, the pounds that have gone missing since I've become a single father. And new paint keeps our family dinners secret to new tenants, but we did live. We did fight and dance and miscommunicate and added too much salt to our jollof rice. And we did arrive as two and became three before we departed in our original numbers. And what is the mathematics of a poltergeist if the hallways are a record of a family that didn't keep? Call it an archive, a tomb, but we did live. I wonder if the Uno cards left in the closet are a Ouija board, and if the children who occupy my daughter's room can conjure the first time she rolled over. And I wonder if they could give that back to me if I asked nice enough. I wonder if they ever cleaned out the microwave or if the kitchen still smells like two kids who didn't know what to do, but still, we did live. We did. We lived and cried and double socked infant feet up to the ankle when the snow suffocated the winter. And we ignored the mail piled on the counter until it was a mountain. Does the counter weigh the same? How much of my breath lingers in the liminal space of the second floor hallway? I asked the same of the songs I hummed to carry me. Where are the fingerprints on the books we've read? The same for the crib we built. Do the mothers who can walk through the living room feel her contractions? And when I asked her what they would say if all that were found here was as we left it, she replied, they'd say they tried.
Whew.
a few
Wow.
stutters there, but you get the idea.
No, no, that's love. We ain't gotta do that. We ain't
Got
gotta do that.
yeah,
Nah, that was wow. Wow. Thank you for that.
for
Thank you
sure.
for that. Listen, Donnie, I want to thank you again for coming through and for sharing so vulnerably today. How and where can folks support you and your work?
The beautiful thing you said to me before is like when you're Googleable, it's pretty easy. You can look me up, Donnie Moreland on Google. You'll see everything from my link tree for Fellowship of the Griots, which can be found on Instagram, Fellowship of the Griots. Or you can find me, you can say Donnie Moreland. I'm all on the first page of Google. So, you'll find my writings, the book, all that. But if you want to know like more specifically, Donnie Moreland, link tree, everything's on there. So
Word, word. Well, thank you again. Thank you again, brother.
I appreciate it.
Listen, before we close, I want to offer a reflection of my own. Something I wrote after learning about Malcolm Jamal Warner's passing, because this loss, it hit different. Here's what I wrote. This Malcolm Jamal Warner death has me in shambles. More grief and loss for Black folk of a certain age to process. Certain celebrities have such a profound impact on our lives. Through his portrayal of Theo, Malcolm showed me vulnerability, naivete, and identity grappling. He introduced us to neurodivergence through strength, not shame. In his roles, Malcolm showed us the importance and influence of Black boy and men relationships. Malcolm showed our tenderness, evident in his booming smile and always eloquent reflection on Black life. He loved us. This hurts. Malcolm loved us. And that still matters. He showed us what it could look like to be seen, not just for our strength, but for our softness. And Donnie, your work is part of that same lineage. To those watching, I want to leave you with this. What's something you inherited from a man in your life that you've had to unlearn? What's a kind of love you're still learning how to give? Take a moment, write it down, speak it aloud, tell someone you trust. Because when it comes to men's mental health and wellness, the road isn't easy, but it's worth it. Peace.